And also after that, we have discussion how to publish in international journal. I don't know. You can Google Google scholar citations or Scopus Index. You see that Pabaiter have published a lot of journal articles and all that about statistical method in this research, in these topics. But it's also good that we can have, let's say, tricks and tips how we can submit, how we can publish to these high index journals. That will be good for us because now one of our job or our work is to publish, to do some research and then to publish it in the high ranking journals, which actually will also increase polytechnic statistics ranking in terms of the research index. I think that's all for my introductions. And then again, thank you very much, Pak Vice Director, Pak Hardius Usman, come here. And actually, Bu Erni also, our director, the director have sent best regards to Pak Bahtiar because she cannot come for some reasons. But actually, this all of here are our lecturers, and then they have different backgrounds from computational, mathematics, sampling, from IT, and then there's one from biostatistics also a long time ago. But now he's expert in economy because he's been like in ADB, IDB. So I think that's all. So we can start for the presentation for Pak Bahtiar. This one. Yeah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
I don't know, what should I say? First of all, thank you so much, Pak Tio, for very generous introduction. It's actually, for me, it's a bit overstretching, but you know, I'm taking what he said as a dua for me.
I mean,
what is a prayer for me. Anyhow, first of all, I would like to thank Pak Vice Director. And I would like also to say hello because this is my first introduction, perhaps to know you all in here. And Pak siapa namanya Pak?
Pak Buzar.
When he said that he graduated from Ann Arbor, and I said, this guy is, if you are a statistician and from North America, and then somebody said that you are from Ann Arbor, you know the quality of that person. Because it's not an easy campus to enter. Ann Arbor is a Michigan, it's a very famous one. So you have a very good person in here, inshallah. And to all of you, selamat pagi, assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera buat semua. Inshallah, I'm very happy to see you all in here. And I would like to do some sharing, some sharing. It's more like a sharing perhaps today rather than teach you, because I know you all of you are very capable people in here. So it's not my intention to do anything to teach you perhaps. That is more like a sharing, and then perhaps from that point we can see to which direction we can go, right, for the future. So here's the background of my little outline of what I'm talking about today. I know perhaps for all of you, you are from a statistics institution, which is, in my understanding, my very limited understanding, is probably more focused on the government statistic or things like that, which is my understanding is also probably based on the survey. Most of the things are based on survey. Why I am as a biostatistician is actually my work is more related to the experimental. So it's really focused on the experimental design as opposed to the survey. But in any case, all those things are really lie with the same foundation. So even though perhaps you will not find a direct application for what I'm talking today, but perhaps it will enrich you a little bit about what subject or what the things that matter outside, a little bit outside of survey, then maybe with that could probably extend it or could enrich you or could probably offer a little bit beneficial when you to broaden the view. Yeah. So first of all, I will talk a little bit about the background and talking about research and types of data, statistic and people's research, and I'm also going to talk about randomized study, and then I will put a particular example, which is one study that I'm doing now, which is really a sponsored study. Perhaps what was it?
Abuzar.
Pak Abuzar. Abuzar, Pak.
Abuzar.
Pak Abuzar will know much better. So, you know, when you after I'm leaving, whenever you have difficulty or questions, I'm sure he will be able to answer you much better than I do. Yeah. And see, I would like to capture your attention first of all. You see this guy,
Capacity cancer.
capacitive cancer therapy.
Who is that?
Dr. Warsito which is a long controversy in Indonesia, yeah? Which is to me is a really an interesting thing. How come such a, if it is beneficial or if it is really not beneficial, how come we, as an academic here, we cannot solve these things? Right? If you know a little bit about design and statistics, you know a little bit about design experiment, you should be able to solve that. Yeah, Pak Abuzar, what do you think? Yeah? But this is really the things that maybe I hope at the end of this the talk, you will probably able to offer some of your thinking of some of your thoughts, write a little article, yeah, in which direction we could probably go. So also, of course, from statistical point of view, if possible. So here's the background. Generally, a researcher reads about 300 articles per year. You read quite a lot of things. So when Patio asked me, how about sharing the ability to publish in the international journal, and then I put this is the first requirement actually. You spend around 3.7 hours searching for articles per week. Yeah, this is searching alone. Yeah, and around 6 hours reading the articles per week, and you read actually 6 articles per week. So on average, you actually spend reading one article for 1 hour. So how could you reach such a level? I mean, believe me, when you're reading article, I'm just quoting my background in oncology. Okay, the first time reading an article in oncology is not easy. Sometimes 2-3 days you don't understand what language they are talking about. It's English, but something else. Yeah? Because you have to be like familiar with the term that they use, to the disease they're talking about. Yeah. So even though sometimes it's coming as statistic, but really it's nothing really to say as directly connected to the statistic. So of course this is applicable to your area as well. Right? Like when you talk about like income per capita for the Indonesian people, for example, I will have difficulty. How do you estimate such thing? You need to know like what they consumption perhaps, right? What intake of calories they're taking every day on a daily basis, and so on and so forth, which is to me might be a very difficult thing to digest, but for you, because you're dealing that on a daily basis, it's going to be a lot easier. So my point in here, you need to be really informed and then always update your knowledge in order to be able to go to the direction of researcher and then to publish the research after that. If you are losing this foundation, then perhaps you need to rethink about that. I know in Indonesia, if you are like Paset, you're already entering the phase in which you are given some of the administrative tasks. I know because I was a docent before in here. I know how difficult it was. Huh? So even to spend like a few 2-3 hours a week is very difficult for us because kalau sudah datang, if you receive the KRS, in the old time we call it KRS, you have to sign everything, you have to, a lot of administrative tasks, okay? So a researcher typically read 6 articles per week, and then you only need 1 hour per article. and that's not easy. Sometimes what I'm doing is actually because I am already familiar with the language. Yeah? So when you see the title, for example, say non-small cell lung cancer early stage, right? I know immediately, okay, this is the disease they are talking about. They are talking about surgery or radiotherapy. Okay, so there is like a prerequisite there in which it's required you to have some basics, and then this basics is not coming from the book or from the teaching in the class. It's coming from reading. So you have to involve yourself over and over and over on the subject that you have. That's very important to keep in mind. Yeah. In any case, if you have any question during my talk, please feel free to interrupt because that's probably easier if you do interactively rather than just bombarding you with all this information. Okay. So the types of scientific publication. So scientific articles published in scientific journals, then normally that's a peer review. Yeah? If it is not peer review, even in Indonesia now, we are not able to submit it as a proof of if you wanted to go naik pangkat, yeah, to go to the next career, you have to have a nice article submitted according to Scopus standard, for example. Yeah, Scopus is just another way to. In fact, Scopus is a way to make sure that your article is quoted or yeah. So quotations essentially that's a quotation things, and then you put some index based on that. Yeah, if somebody quote your article, then you get higher and higher and so on. Yeah. And then another type of scientific publication is a patents, specialized for science and technology. This is another way in which some people, because when you do the publication in the scientific articles, sometimes they ask you that this is become public, the data, right? More and more nowadays it's becoming, if you, for example, submit in PLOS ONE, right? PLOS ONE journal, they will ask you, they will do the requirement that you have to provide the data publicly. So you will not be able to hide anything. You have to provide the data publicly. I know that because I'm one of the reviewers there. In fact, they're asking me to be one of the editors, but I'm too busy with my daily work now. I have no luxury time. I have time is really luxury for me to do such thing. And the third type is books, of course. All of us are reading from the books. In particular, when we are at school, we are going to from the textbook, yeah, the textbook. And then the next thing is the presentation at the academic conferences. Yeah? And this is normally coming as either an abstract, right? For example, an abstract, and also it's coming. Sometimes they do a follow-up publication of that abstract. So you have, in addition to be published in the abstract, they also publish your article if it is selected to the some kind of special issue of journal. And the next thing, of course, government agency report, and that's exactly what you are in here. I believe you release the statistic every year, right? The statistic of income per capita of the Indonesian people, for example, and then you estimate the inflation, for example, right? You do the estimation of the inflation, and you do the estimation of quite a few things. But what is the contribution of food in the inflation of this year, for example, right? Of course, you know much better than this. But that's one type of the government, one type of scientific publication. Another thing is scientific publication in the World Wide Web, yeah, which is essentially coming from www and then like Wikipedia, if you wish. There's quite a lot of things there, even though in the old time in particular, when the Wikipedia was published at the beginning, a lot of people really established that entity. So I don't see any problem with that. Of course, we have also books, technical reports, pamphlets, working papers, and so on, blogs and site forums. Yeah, and in 2008, peer-reviewed journals articles remained the predominant publication type and have the highest prestige. And then this is normally required by the governmental body, for example, the Ministry of Pendidikan Tinggi is in here, right? They require you have to have a peer-reviewed journal. And then sometimes, because in Indonesia, peer review could be local, they're adding international journal. But when you're talking about international and you're out of Indonesia, nobody's saying international really. Because really, it's kind of overlapping things perhaps, right? Because when you say journal, yes, yeah, international journal by default, then yeah. So, however, it says that journals vary enormously in their prestige and then importance and their status, and influence the visibility and impact of the studies they publish. Therefore, they have that Scopus indexation. So they have the impact factor, IP. I'm sorry, I'm the Sundanese now, IF. Yeah, impact factor 5, for example, is really good. In oncology, one of the highest is if you go for example, for like Journal of Clinical Oncology, which is has a 20 impact factor, is really quite high. Yeah, really quite high. But also journals like the one that you have like in science, for example, Nature and so on. It's a really high impact journal. Yeah. Now we move to the next topic, research and types of data. Quantitative research. I believe all of you in here are really quantitative people, right? Because you're dealing with the data directly on a daily basis, and this is essentially systematic empirical investigation or observable phenomena via statistical techniques. Yeah. When you talk about statistical techniques in here, it's not really restricted to the like exploration or really related only for data simulation or really only related to the data analysis. No, even how to design, how to gather the data, that's already part of the statistics. And then I'm sure you as surveyors in general, you know the very basic thing, the requirement for to do the good survey is the good design for survey. Otherwise, you will have difficulty with the bias that we'll talk about that later on. And then the nature of collected information data is quantitative and allow the use of the statistical technique to analyze the data. Right? This is, of course, an important thing after collecting the data, good data, and then you do the analysis. But in the old time, I have people told me that if you collect garbage in, they say garbage also out. Right? So the data analysis really doesn't matter, but what is important is like the input itself. If the input is good, and then the methodology to do the analysis is good, then you're okay. But even though the methodology to do the analysis is good, but the input is not really good, and then you'll be in trouble. You'll not be able to enhance the data itself by the technique. Yeah. So really the collection of the data is one of the key issues. And then you, I believe as a BPS, yeah, BPS, you will know that really well, right? You know that really well. Because otherwise, you'll be in trouble, I guess. The third one is characterized by hypothesis testing and inference. And this is really related more to the experimental, right? When we do the research, of course, we have the hypothesis first. If there is no hypothesis, there's nothing to talk about. Right? So to judge the quality of research, sometimes you will go to the hypothesis. What exactly the hypothesis of this? And then you see the methodology. That's a quick way. Whether the methodology that you used to collect the data or to design the study is really matching with the hypothesis. That's one way to judge very quickly. That's one secret I told you. When I do the review of the journal, that's one thing I'm doing. Yeah. See the hypothesis, and after that, seeing whether and they call it endpoints. I don't know in general statistics, perhaps it's more like the outcome by in biostatistics, we love to say endpoints, the endpoints of the things that we wanted to collect, and then after that, you also need to see how they do the data analysis. But that's really the data analysis. You can fix that problem. If you go to the journal and the reviewer say, please do this to enhance the data, for example, you can simply do that. But if there's something wrong with the design of the study, for example, of the collection of data, and that's very difficult, if not to say impossible to fix. So that's very important to keep in mind. And apart from that, there is also a qualitative research. And then this is normally going mostly with the people in the social science. They talk about qualitative research. A method of inquiry employed in various disciplines normally focuses on the why and how. So it doesn't really employ any statistical method in strict sense. It's most likely they will employ like how to do the interview to the people to gather the data that you need and then to do such thing. And the result or conclusion of the study is only applicable to the case being studied. And this is a little bit restrictive. However, having said that, it's not like you have to be exactly like that. And also, the important thing perhaps for us in here is characterized by a lack of statistical inference. And that's exactly the opposite of what we are doing as a statistician, right? We want to do a statistical test in order to have that conclusion. And that's what is statistical inference. But in the qualitative research, we don't do that normally. So what we are focusing in here is really quantitative research. And that's the point of departure of the, like what I'm trying to discuss with you today. So in quantitative research, there are observational studies. So this is observable phenomena. Normally, you simply collect that. You do not design, in the sense you do not do an experiment in here, right? So you simply collect the phenomena you have, and then most of the time, I think, in statistics as a BPS in here, you are doing these things because you are only take the data or the information that's coming from what happened already in the society, right? Like the income of the society, you have no power to do any like you have no power to do any intervention on that unless you are going to be a government itself, like a finance minister. That's something else, right? And then researcher in here has no direct control and cannot modify the phenomena. That's what I'm just mentioning to do. And it might be measured at certain time point and then cross-sectional. And then you are well aware of this. If you have the data, most of your data, I believe, is time series data, right? And then you're collecting them over time. And then when you do the cross-sectional, you only capture one picture of it. But that sometimes is misleading. And I believe you are follow a certain period, which is time series longitudinal, and you know that in the BPS, you follow the data very closely, maybe on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or yearly basis, and so on. But you have all the records so that any departure from certain model, for example, if you are modeling, and then perhaps there's something happens there. Okay. And the second one is more related to my field, experimental or control study, in which you have the systematic empirical investigation. We have the condition that may be preset by researcher. For example, when we're talking about clinical trials and we are talking about specific disease, we know that, okay, all those people that come in here have to have, for example, non-small cell lung cancer in an advanced stage. If you are only having for example, small cell lung cancer, you are immediately out. They call that you are ineligible, right? Or if you have non-small lung cancer, but at early stage, and then you are immediately ineligible. So and so on and so forth. And might also be longitudinal, however. Right? You follow the patient, for example, they're entering the study, you're randomizing them to go to the control arm or to the experimental arm, and after that, you give the medicine, different medicine according to the arm they randomized to, and then you follow them. So most of the time, it's also longitudinal in that sense. However, the longitudinality in here is really restricted. It's not until forever, like you've done right in here. We have on the certain time where, for example, you only follow the patient for 3 years. Otherwise, most of them will die anyway. Right? Because we are talking about cancer, and in cancer, when you're talking about advanced non-small lung cancer, their expectation is only around 1 year. The median of the overall survivors are only around 1 year. even though you can, the substitution might be different depending on motivation that you have. And now we probably come to the statistic and pitfalls, but if you have any question now, feel free.
Any questions?
I'm a bit hesitant to go and talking alone like myself in here. I need some input back.
Good deal. Any question?
Anyhow, maybe after seeing this cartoon, you will be able to, I mean, it will trigger your curiosity. Look at that cartoon. Most people use statistic like a drunk uses a lamp post for support instead of illumination. You know, the lamp post is like lampu jalan, ya. Lampu jalan itu kan di, oh sorry, I'm speaking Indonesian. But it's the intention of the lamp post is to enable you to see your way, right? But for the drunk people, no. The purpose of that lamp post is to nyender kalau sudah mabuk kan. So most people using the statistic is like that. Yeah, this is the quote from Andrew Land. Yeah? Andrew.
Oh yeah.
It's a famous guy there.
Yeah.
And then the scientific method here is saying, here are the facts. What conclusion can be drawn from them? And the creationist method is they doing here. Where is the conclusion? What facts can we find to support it? This is really talking about like people in the belief, believer or unbeliever, when you talk about the religion things. But most of the time they are talking about the people with the biblical prediction and so on and so on. But anyhow, this is a bit sensitive in Indonesia, this cartoon. but what is important in here, statistical methods are misunderstood and often misused and abused. Don't always believe what is claimed by people. Don't always believe. Even if it's published in a major journal or you're being told by the KOL. You know KOL? Key Opinion Leaders. These people are, in medicine in particular, they're very important people. Huh? Sometimes like they're more like a dewa. Yeah. So if they say this is go to this direction, and then people will go to that direction, even though they don't have enough evidence. So what is important for us as a researcher and statistician? Okay, we will follow you. However, please provide the evidence. So you have to use the critical thinking in this case. Evidence based. That's why it's called in the medicine we call it evidence-based medicine. Everything has to be based on the evidence. And then now you go to previous cartoon that I show you, probably you can trigger something already with you, with that the helmet, the electronic helmet things. I don't know how you call that anyhow. So there are 3 rules in the critical thinking or critical reading. First of all, this is the most important rule: read the paper. Read the paper. Yeah, you have to read the paper, even though for the first time. I understand from my experience, the difficulty, English is not my mother tongue. English is not my mother tongue. In fact, when I started to learn English, when I already graduated, I was a docent at that time in 93, 94. I did the TOEFL test. My TOEFL is 300. My TOEFL 300. And then when I'm going to Canada to study there, they told me, you have to have 570. Yeah? TOEFL. It also, I have to achieve that in 1.5 years. Huh? That's really crazy thing. But alhamdulillah, I did it. Anyhow, I was able to achieve 570 within 1.5 years. And that's why in 96, they say, you're accepted and you can go to Canada. So I was in Canada already in 97. But the important thing in here is read the paper. And in able to read the paper, the first thing that you need to know is the first requirement, of course, the language. Okay? But this is going actually interchangeable in the sense like if you read more paper, it improves your language skills, right? If you read more, it improves your language skills. So it goes without saying that by reading more, you actually improve also your language skills. But as I mentioned earlier, the reading in here is not only reading in English, but reading according to the subject or the object that you are interested to, because a lot of requirements there, right? As I mentioned earlier. If you're reading, for example, in the oncology, you need to know a little bit about the disease. You need, when people say non-small cell lung cancer or small cell lung cancer, when they say cutaneous lymphoma, when they say, for example, mesothelioma, and so on, you know it immediately without even seeing the definition. Otherwise, at the beginning, though, almost for every single term that they use, that you have to open the dictionary or search on Google. But that's fine. That's a normal process. That's a normal process, right? Yeah. So don't give up. After 1 year, you will be able to master those things already. You will be able to catch the things, the information already. Yeah? Read the paper. The second thing, after that, look at the data. So after reading the paper, at the very least, if you're already mastering already the field, right? You can read the introduction quickly, just to get what they are talking about, what the hypothesis they have in here. But after that, you have to look at the data. Right? Then there's sometimes a lot of things that could go in this data, right? Some people they mention about things, the conclusion which is the opposite of the data they have. Right? It could happen. And rule number three is make your own opinion. Yeah, make your own opinion based on the objective opinion in this case, based on the data that's being presented, based on the hypothesis that they have at the beginning, and then based on the statistic and the inference that they have. So,
may I interrupt?
Yes.
Okay, about this. Sorry, my microphone only 300 and now around 250. Okay, in my experience, for one Scopus article, I have to read around 750 articles. And my article published in Scopus in Q2 in Emerald in England. If I follow this rule, I think I can finish to read 750 articles for my article. So I think for us, my paper, yes, I will follow this rule. 1, 2, or 3 paper, yes. But after that, I think I have no time for follow this rule. And refer to what you explained before about what time we spend for researcher read. I think, is it possible for us to follow this rule and with subject to time we spend for one article a year? I hope you got what I said. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very important point. It goes without saying that indeed, with all your activities, sometimes it's a bit difficult to do the things. However, my point in here is more like if you are starting. So there are level or the maqam in religious term. There is maqam, like the maqam of vice director is actually already high. So sometimes in such a maqam, such a like a level, you could only read the abstract. Should be sufficient. Right? The title and abstract, you can do that in like 15 minutes maybe, or even less to know what exactly it is. But for the beginner, they really need to go to this process. For the beginner, you really need to go to this. Otherwise, you will not be able to get the sense of what we are talking about. Of course, these things could also come from teaching, because when you teach in class, for example, a lot of questions from the students, and without even realizing, you actually absorb a lot of things already. So this just kind of rule of thumb. It's not necessarily I have to go to that direction, but it's a good thing if you're a beginner. To the young people in Pula, right? If you graduated 2-3 years ago, inshallah, this is a good way to go. Any other question? Yes.
In my opinion, I think there is one step before rule number one for critical reading. In my opinion.
Yes, yes.
Uh, because I think we have to select which paper that we want to read, but it's not only one. But
Of course, it's correct. It goes without saying. Of course, the paper of your interest, if you are, for example, focusing on the survey, on the economic parameters, for example, yeah, you need to read the paper in that area, of course. So this goes without saying. In the sense like, if you're focusing on doing something, really, it you really need to do the search within that area. Even if you go for Google, for example, if you have some idea, oh, I wanted to do to find out if the methods that I'm thinking now it could probably work in doing the estimation of the income that coming this year. Of course, you search for the Google term, you'll go for how to estimate the income, for example, right? And then how to do the unbiased estimation for income and so on. And then all these things, I'm sure with the algorithm which is being prepared by Google, will be able to make you 90% already in the area. So the rest of it you have to pick up by yourself. But you are very correct. That is.
I think differentiating which one would be read. I mean, not all paper in our subject on the field, because the question is actually come from my students. They are only beginner, right? So they ask me at the lecture how to how to select good paper to read.
In this case, it's really good that you, as a mentor, you can as a starting point, you could select for them. You could pick the paper in which that probably goes to the correct direction. You select for them and ask them to read. And then after that, you have kind of a weekly presentation. Let them do the one paper, let's say, for 1 week, right? And after that, you have a mix. In the old time, we have the so-called colloquium. I don't know now, huh? But when I was at the university before, we have a colloquium class in which with this colloquium, normally you have to read one paper at least, and then you do a small presentation, right? And then this is being rotated among the students. That's really helpful. That's really helpful. And then you could make that as a part of the weekly basis, let's say, or even 2 weekly basis. You can do such things. And then there is nothing really. It will only enhance the student. So with that, they will have exposed already to the to the scientific article. Ya, Ibu dulu baru Bapak. Ya.
Thank you, Pak Badian. I'm surely agree for these 3 rules in critical reading, because in computer statistics, the first step that we have to look at is about the data. But based on your opinion, what is how the best way to connect the data and the methodology? Thank you.
You know much better than I do if you're talking about survey in here. In survey, for example, they have a lot of things like how to do the unbiased estimate, right? Because the important thing that we will really talk after that is about bias. The unbiased things is, first of all, it has to come by randomization, right? And then a lot of survey, for example, in here in the quick count and so on. And when you talking about election, general election, they're doing very well. But some so-called pollster or surveyors, they did quite bad. In particular, if you're affiliated to certain party, you will always have some bias to do something among your own people. Let's say, sometimes without even realizing it, because member of the party is only concentrated in certain part of Indonesia, let's say, and then you do the quick count based on that. Of course, you get a bias. You will get a biased estimate. So the very first thing is to do is randomize thing. But even more important than to do the to pick up the random sample is even more important is to understand the general population first of all. And then from that, you can say, oh, I have to do the multi-stage, for example, because this area, some of the area are more homogeneous than the other, for example, just to give. So I would say you know much better than I do when you do these things, but the very important thing is to do the very good way to do the sampling, which is the randomized one as a basis, and then after that you can apply whatever required according to the population that you have, according to the distribution of the population that you have. Yeah, but
Thank you. My question is about actually related to the picture that you showed to us.
which one? Pak? This one?
Yes, this is very good. You call it as KOL. I think it's not easy for us when we have a culture like this to try to exercise with the culture about critical thinking. Because especially with us, we are not fully academic thinking as academics. Because sometimes when we found something, we try to tell to people about things, then someone will come with us with what they call as expert judgment. My question is, do you have any experience that you can share to us? How can we deal with something like expert judgment that we really know actually there is no expert because expert judgment should be based on also on the fact data and something like that. Do you have experience of can we deal with that so that we can still enhance our critical thinking instead of just because he has power and so on? Thank you.
Makasih, but that's very important things. I understand, in particular in our culture. I'm Indonesian, even though I may be working outside, but my culture is still Indonesian. Sometimes it's difficult for us to go against the bapak besar dari atas. This is very. So one way you could probably do with such thing is to gather the information or the data that you have from different sources, let's say, and then presented that, not to counter the opinion, but just you can say like to enrich your opinion. We can still use this in the Indonesian way. We are not countering him, but to enrich your opinion, and hopefully with such thing, enriching the information that's coming from the key opinion leaders with information that's coming from facts or from experiment or from the field in this case. Hopefully, he will be able to change his mind at the very least. But this exercise, I think, is important to be started within the class itself. That's why such things that I mentioned, like if you have colloquia, for example, colloquium like once a week, in which a student like take turn to the presentation based on the paper that you selected, that's going to be really helpful. That's going to be really helpful because they do the exercise, right, to express their opinion, because this is the sense of even to be a judge or an expert. It will require a lot of reading, a lot of exercise. In fact, it's not coming only by just like my sulap. No, it has come to exercise. I really believe on that. Yeah, I really believe on that.
Anyone else? Ah,
Yeah. Thank you very much for knowledge shared to us. As a reviewer, there are many things that I want to know. The last week I submit my student's paper to Information Journal. Is one of Scopus Index Journal. I know that I very realize that it is hard, but I just want to try to know whether it's good. I can get the suggestion or the review. Although the final is rejected, but it's fine. They require that our paper should has novelty and general significance. But I still confused. What is the definition of novelty? This since we have already do such a combination of some methods that have not been practiced by another author or another researcher, and we apply in coincidence. My research in is about text mining, so they apply in English text, but we apply in Bahasa Indonesia. I think what is the definition of novelty? Because some my college said me that if we apply in different environment or in different data or in different texts, I think they said that it's such a novelty maybe, but and our paper to our paper also produce general significance, but they said that they need more general significance. But yeah, please tell us what is the really specification for submitting index Scopus index journal. And the second is, does the reviewer see how many paper that we have already reviewed to write our paper?
I will.
Minimal.
Yes, I will answer from the second one. So there is no researcher that's coming by themselves. That's why even in the journal, there is a peer review journal. Normally, the more senior one coming with the junior and then train them. In the sense like when you do the publication, you really doing it to the publication with the senior first, senior author, and then more junior author, and then by time you actually do this process over and over, and you are already trained. The problem is now, if you are coming as a new researcher and then you take the lead directly, it's sometimes ada pepatah lama. It's like kata dalam tempurung, right? We thought this is already the things, but in fact our like horizon is really restricted. Why? Because we are not trained yet. Supposed to be the senior one has to take their junior and then do this process until a few years, let's say, and then they could be like a continuous process of training. So that should be the ideal way, yeah. The ideal way in the publication world, and then that's what I've seen essentially. What I've seen. If I'm just graduating from my PhD, for example, I'm relying on from my supervisor. My supervisor knows much better about this area than I do, and then he knows to which direction you should go. He knows much better. However, after a few years, well, you could probably already taking with the problem with just, for example, a new person to go directly. It's difficult to understand that probably these things require more. And then the novelty in this case is going to be different from field to field.
Yeah.
It will, for example, when I'm talking about the drug development, the novelty is there. It could be from the same drug, but if we give the drug, for example, to different patient characteristics, like in the sense like if you're talking about in drug development or in translational research, you're talking about certain mutation, for example, right? When you're talking about non-small cell lung cancer, you're talking about EGFR mutation, for example, just for example. And then if you apply this drug to the common or to all comers, to all people with non-small cell lung cancer, and then you apply, for example, to those people which has the certain mutation, the EGFR mutation, and these two different research are different. And then the second one could also be called novel. It's a novelty in this case, even though it's the same thing. I mean, from the awam, from the like layman eyes, it's probably the same. But no, for the expert, they know this is two different things. So that expertise will come with again, go back to the very first thing I mentioned. It's coming through experience. That's why I say reading and reading and reading. It will enrich you. It will enrich you more and more. It's really the implementation of Iqra. Yeah. Allah mentioned to us to do the Iqra first. Do the reading. Read all this, including read the universe. Yeah.
How about the many papers should be reviewed? Should be we make a literature review?
Yes, in this case, it's probably good if you are a junior researcher. It's good to ask if your senior people in here, for example, they have time to do the kind of own review first before
Oh.
even releasing it outside. Because with that, you could probably already enrich the paper a little bit, or if the direction is not really correct, I mean, put the correct
Correksi.
quote unquote, yeah, could probably already fix something. So utilize Pak Prof. Abuzar in here. He should be able to help you.
The field is different. Limited edition. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good interaction. Maybe we go a little bit more and then we
Maybe related with the city question and your answer, I have a question for our student here, especially with when they research for scriptsy. Is it fair for request novelty for as satu student?
no. I would say no. I would rather think that as a process to be able to, even if they repeat some research from outside, that should be okay. To my opinion, because in the Barat and in the West, there is not really a thesis for S1 students. They can write a so-called paper, but that paper is really more like a summary, summary of the things that what's going on, for example, in the field. Because that such thing is important in order for them to get the feeling what's going on the field. For example, if they go from, they will graduate from statistics, they have to be able to summarize what exactly being done to do the estimation, for example, correct. To me, that still should be sufficient, even though that method is already exists. Shouldn't be a problem. But if they can do even more, of course, better. But to me, I'm not going to require that too much. But,
Well, it seems to me for our students in our polytechnic, replication is acceptable. Yeah, replication at S1 level, just to replicate what others are doing, but we replicate in different settings, in different environment, different places, maybe it's new variables, additional variables. This is a kind of learning process to be a researcher. It is at the first level of graduate in university. If you are for dissertation, for doctoral degree, there's different things. For our polytechnics, I think replication is acceptable.
couldn't agree more. It's a good point. Yeah.
I think we have to improve the scriptsy.
It's too difficult to require them to do the novelty. They are not to that level yet.
Yeah.
They are not to that level. It's this is like learning psychology of the student actually. That's what. So, Pak Kadir is from UIN Sharif, and he's teaching a lot of education things, and including statistical method for the educational research. He knows a lot better than I do in this area. So,
Sure. May I ask?
sure.
I want to ask about, do you have a suggestion or strategy to us how we have to choose a journal publication that we think that it has a higher probability to publication our paper, because statistics there have many journal publication. So how we can choose the journal that we think that our paper will be go to publish, because statistics is a faster science that have a faster development in the statistics. So if we have spent many time just to wait review, and then in 1 year our method become a classic, not new again. So you as a reviewer, what kind of journal publication that we have to choose to review our journal that has big chance to publish our paper? Thank you.
That's a very good question, but a really tough one, because it really depends on the area. I understand when you do statistical method, for example, and you submit the things to the journal, sometimes it takes a year. It takes a year just to be reviewed, and then sometimes at the end they refuse. Right?
Yeah.
At the end they refuse. Statistic is not a very easy area. It's not a very easy because it's part of mathematics, right? And then I've never heard people that can publish in mathematics within 3 months. No, at least 1 year. You submit from the submission until the publication. It differs from the area that I'm in now, in the drug development part. Sometimes, as a researcher, they only ask you, the journal mention that, okay, we will have this time frame. Within 2 weeks, we will get already the decision from the reviewers. Within 2 days, we will already send this to the reviewers. So this is two different things. That's why you see in the field of like medicine, for example, it can go very fast. Yeah, within 3 months, you already publish the things. But within statistics, I don't even think 1 year is enough. Sometimes you need 1 year and a half, and so on and so forth. And then for those people who judge this, like those who dictate, they should really understand these things. They should really understand, because without that understanding, it's going to be very difficult to. I mean, it's not fair to judge, for example, a mathematician or statistician with the standard that you have, for example, in the medicine. Because the medical people can publish the journal very quickly, 3 months done. And then you have to wait another 1 year, 1.5 year. So at the very least, they have to consider that and take that into account, maybe not to put the restriction too high. I don't know if I can answer you directly, but this is just to give you that this is a very broad area, right? And things that could be very different from field to another one. And then it's very difficult to say a general thing. Sometimes go to the specific. But what is, as a general rule, you can probably say that if you are a beginner in the research, try to submit in the low impact journal. Like if the impact factor is 1 or below, that's fine. But don't get me wrong. Sometimes the impact factor is also very tricky. In education, for example, sometimes you find more than one. I mean, less than one impact factor, but in fact, that's already quite good journal. It's already quite difficult to submit to that journal. So it really depends from field to field, and difficult to get a very general answer. But the way, like as a rule of thumb, you could probably go to the low first, and then as you have more experience, you can go to the higher impact journal.
Or maybe we should choose a more specific field, applied statistics, to publish in faster journal.
Sure, I think that's one way. Yeah, because applied, it really depends on the field. Applied statistics sometimes are quite fast. Like if you have, like in Indonesia, for example, a lot of things that happens outside of Indonesia not necessarily applicable in here for the data, right? And if you do the same method from outside, as you mentioned about the text, right? And then you apply to the specific condition in Indonesia, I think that could be considered novelty. However, you really need to put that very clearly. You have to put that very clearly at the abstract, in the abstract of your journal, of your article, because sometimes the first things that what the reviewer doing or the editor doing is they only read the article abstract. If there is no key word there that matching their expectation, they just simply no. I've seen this is already example, but if you said this has been applied to the outside of to the English keyword, however, there is nothing being done to the Indonesian keyword. If you put that in your journal, in your answer, probably they will catch their attention, right? Put the things that could catch their attention, because sometimes they simply ignore, and then you're actually falling to the false negative, if you wish. In fact, your journals and your articles are supposed to be positive, but because they're lacking the things that they require, you don't have any interesting keyword, and then you're falling to the negative. In the sense like they reject you when in fact your publication is actually good. So a lot of things could happen.
You can continue. After that, we have another discussion.
Okay, mind biases. This is a difficult vocabulary. This mind biases. Wikipedia. In statistics. So what I'm saying here, please pay attention to biases. Bias. Mind biases. So by definition in Wikipedia, it says bias is systematic favoritism present in data collection, analysis, or reporting of quantitative research. The dangerous thing in here, bias doesn't need to be intentional. Yeah. It is usually not and can be well hidden. Like when I talk about if you do the quick count and the quick count being done by the party, without realizing actually they're only sampling the people or the TPS that's coming from their basis pendukung, right? Not necessarily intentional, but just because they have saksi there, they have the witnesses, for example, available in that area, yeah, and that without realizing they're actually sampling this is a bias. They already introduced bias in their things. No wonder sometimes they claim we are the winner. But in fact, the more independent quick count say, no, you're not the winner. For example, so another point in here, increasing sample size will yield more precision, but doesn't help against bias. Because some people say, oh, just adding more sample. Sample will give you a smaller variance, right? A smaller standard deviation, which means more precise things, but not necessarily help you against bias. That's the thing, because if you're already missing the target, let's say, the target population, and then you try to increase the precision to the miss point, you will not be able to still to catch that point that you are intended to. Okay. In the publication, 3 most common errors in publication. Confusion about the meaning of numbers. Yeah. But you are all statisticians here. You have no confusion at all. So for the medical people, they have sometimes they have difficulties about this p-values, power, the interpretation, and so on. But for the statistician, the second one is more dangerous actually. Data dredging. Yeah? What does that say, sir? They say, as statisticians say, the famous thing say, if you torture the data hard enough, they will tell you whatever you like to say. If you do the torture to the data hard enough, they will tell you. They simply give, okay, the data will tell you anything you wish. That's very important for us statisticians to understand these things. And that's why in medical, for example, you have the so-called SAP, statistical analysis plan. This has to be established at the beginning, even before doing the analysis. Yeah. So that to guard you from this data dredging, because as you see your data are not significant. Oh, I wanted to go to this direction. You change your mind 1,000 times. But as a statistician, you know that as you have more and more doing the analysis, you have more and more chances to be success. But that success could probably an error, right? Therefore, A could be simply a false positive, but in fact we have a negative data. And the third point in here is bias comparison. Yeah. So we have to realize these things, because when we talk about these things, in particular when we talk about in medical research, sometimes we exclude a lot of patients. For example, we are intending to do this population for those people with early non-small cell lung cancer. They do have that early non-small cell lung cancer, but also they have some kind of other disease, right? And then later on they say, oh, because it has other disease, we'll remove this because this is not. This kind of thing you have to be aware about. Otherwise, you will introduce bias. That's why in medical, in statistics in medical statistics, we use so-called ITT principle, intent to treat principle. So before doing randomization, so whatever the result of randomization, we will do that the analysis according to their randomization, regardless of what they receive later, for example, of this patient they receive later on. So this is very important things to avoid bias. So this is the book of rules. It is not enough to say you did something. So let's say it's in here. Gravel, Opatny, and Shapiro published in 2009. They say of the 400 articles published in 2002 and in 10 medical journals, 249 or 62% supported the use of ITT, intent to treatment. Right? Among these, available patients were clearly analyzed as randomized in 192 or 77% out of these 249. Authors use a modified ITT in 9%. When they say modified, and then you suspect that immediately. When they say modified ITT, what is the modification? Is that modification being done or being described at the beginning, even before starting the analysis, or after? If that happens after starting analysis, then you will simply say, "No, this is sometimes like a fishing expedition." Because they found, for example, there is no clear or there is no significant in the ITT, and then they simply change it a little bit so that they can get the significant result. It could happen like that, right? Then clearly violated a major component of ITT in 7%, and the approach used was unclear in 7%. This study emphasized that authors should use the label intention to treat or ITT quite differently. So you need to be careful with it, and then. But having said that, I don't know how exactly it's applied in the field of BPS or government surveyors like you. It's a bit difficult, maybe, but yeah. Anyhow, if you use the good design in the random to get your random sampling, stay with that. Yeah, stay with that random sampling. You don't need to change things because later on you found, for example, if you go to the certain areas and you randomization already say okay, you have to sample from that village. But when you go to that village, you say, oh, they are very poor people, they have nothing really, and then you suddenly change your mind. You have to go to the different village beside that. No, that's not something wrong already because you introduce already bias in your result. Okay, this is maybe just a little bit. I'm just trying to bridge with what you have in here. Now interpretation of the bias. Huh? Look at this beautiful lady there. It's beautiful, but see from the mirror, it's a bit different, right? So it could happen like that. You are just perfectly fine, but because have your bias, and then you're saying that this is something else. So systematic favoritism or distortion in the way results are reported or interpreted. Of 72 randomized trials with negative primary outcomes, in which negative is being defined as a p more than 0.05, published in 2006, severe distortion in the interpretation of the results, i.e. no uncertainty in framing, no acknowledgement that the results were non-significant, recommendation to use experimental treatment, and so on, was inherited in conclusion of the abstract 33% and conclusion of the paper 26.4%. So they put something, yeah, a lot of people put something in the hypothesis, but after they get the result, the inference, they interpret the data differently against their statistical result. So that's what it says there. Okay. This confirmation bias. Information that goes against prior beliefs, this is very important also, is questioned and scrutinized much more than the information that confirms prior beliefs. Right? If you know, for example, in Jakarta here, and for example, this is just to give you a fake example perhaps, and you know the certain districts are really poor, right? However, when you go there and then take your sampling of your survey, you found that, oh no, how come they have so much money, these people? And then you will scrutinize the result more, of course. I'm sure about that. when the surveyors coming back, the boss of the surveyors said, no, you probably do something wrong in here because you have some setup in mind, but you don't probably know. Maybe last year they got lotto, huh? Menang SDSB. Maybe. Huh? Let's say this is just for the sake of example. Huh? It could be like that. So if you have the something information there as a prior belief, sometimes it could lead you to this to bias. However, pay attention also. This is one way to detect if there is any problem at all with the methodology, right? Like in the sense, like if you suspect an area is really poor and suddenly they got a really good result in the like in their income, for example, it could probably your suspicions is probably true. So this is you really have to balance the things and you have to walk on the fine line, right? The fine line. This is a which positive. This is we're talking about trials, our challenge. Which one is not? So probably not very applicable to you in here. But in the medical, people sometimes they really wanted to know the things which is really challenging, right? Like the case of Dr. Warsita, maybe it's challenging things. So if there is any result there, you wanted to know more rather than the result that comes from different papers. And also, there is often suggestive text in the discussion of a small randomized trial that say that if this trial had been larger, it could it could very well have been significant. Sounds nice. Huh? It sounds nice, but really, this is the thing which is, as a reviewer, you probably will cross that immediately. Why? If you really knows could have been better, why don't you plan in advance? That's the very reason why we do the experimental design, why we do the sample size calculation, why we do the all this plan with the study, right? So I hope I'm not confused with this. Huh? And then hindsight bias. Huh? This is like saying, I know it all along. Effect. The inclination to see past events as being predictable. For example, when happens Germany was lost, yeah, like in the like a week ago, let's say. I mean, at the beginning, people say, "Oh no, this Germany will probably go through the final." But after that, they say, some people say, "I know it already that they will already be eliminated in the first round because the team were not compact." For example, they can say things like that. But that's really the bias thing. That because of what? Because it's coming after the fact. Anything that comes post hoc normally is fast. As a statistician, you have to be suspicious. As statisticians, you should really be careful if any analysis coming as a post hoc analysis. Everything should really be pre-planned in advance. Right? It's that to guard you against bias. In particular, we are statisticians are really smart people. Huh? If you torture your data hard enough, you will be able to tell them anything you wish to say. Again, I'm going to that quotation. Yeah. Yes, this is for the critical reading. You can go that Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. Now, again, this is for medical people. Huh? You probably have different things in here. But you can always ask Abu Zara if anything, inshallah, he will probably be able to help you. So, critical reading, this is like bumbu-bumbunya, yeah? So you have to address the following questions for yourself. First of all, what is the population eligible to the trial? When you're talking about trials, when you're talking about your area, of course, you are talking about the population in which you do the survey. And are patients are excluded, or are any village, for example, being excluded in your survey, intentionally or non-intentionally? Are assessment common practice, and so on and so forth. And then the second point is, are all treatments clearly detailed, or would the experimental treatment be feasible in my practice? Right? And is the visit schedule? This is again the things which is happen in the medical field when you have is the visit schedule our exams are during the follow-up appropriate and feasible. But I would think this is in your field is more like whether you sample according to the time frame that you have made in advance, right? Because I would imagine if you do try to estimate the rice production during the paceklik time, you will not be able to get that correctly, right? So you have to either sampling it like continuously during the year in the certain period of time, right? But also in this case, if you focus only when when the panen happens, it could probably an overestimate, right? So this is what could happen. If you do the estimation, for example, for panen for 1 year, and you only pick up, let's say, the panen raya in July and something, let's say in September, you could probably miss the production as a whole in 1 year. Right? So you have to do the consistent sampling in this case. Maybe you do that in every 2 months and so on, and then you have to have like previous data that are available in which you could probably help you to determine which time point to choose for a sampling. Okay, so that's all what it says about in here in this critical reading. The study design appropriate to assess the stated hypothesis. This is also very important to you, and then you're dealing with that all the time. And then this is in the medicine is, of course, this is very important things, because if we have made the study design really not reflecting the stated hypothesis, and then you will not be able to do any conclusion of the study. And also the endpoints will define and meaningful. Any questions so far? So, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. This is very important. Eh? When we don't find a statistically significant difference in treatment efficacy between the two groups, that doesn't mean that the two treatments are equivalent. Because some people, when they do, and this is in particular, I'm talking about in medicines, right? So they wanted to do a study which is so-called the study which is power according to to have like a superior study. Superior study. We wanted to find if drug A is better than drug B. But after that, they found there is no difference. What they claim, because of that, they claim that these two drugs are similar. You cannot claim like that in medicine. You cannot claim like that. You can do claim like that if you do power the study according to non-inferiority, yeah, or equivalence trial. I don't know if it makes sense to you, because this is easier language for me and Pak Abuzar, but probably for you it's a bit, this is kind of sama dengan main-main kata saja, ya. Maybe you don't understand it. Sama dengan main-main kata. But really, this has some meaning in medical statistics. It has some meaning, yeah. So the p-value measure the strength of evidence against the null hypothesis of no difference. Have to remember that that's valid everywhere, not the evidence for it. Yeah. Karena apa? Karena why I'm changing to Indonesian suddenly? Because you're always testing the null hypothesis. You do not test the alternative hypothesis. No. You do the test on the null hypothesis. That's the basis of the inference. Yeah. Even if the treatment efficacy truly differs, for example, p-values may be not significant because due to the play of chance alone, this is the type 2 error, or because of the insufficient amount of information. For example, in this case, you underpowered the study. The statistician that doing the study did not either did not expect such a small difference, or the clinician that provide the information for the statistician did not expect such a small difference. And the top two errors, yeah, are related to the conclusion, whether the conclusion of any study are valid. The answer to a randomized control trial that doesn't confirm one's belief is not the conduct of several sub-analyses until one can see what one believes. Rather, the answer is to examine one's belief carefully. Yeah, so this is again the main, like kind of playing words, but really it's an important things. The top two errors in publication, first of all, is uncontrolled multiplicity, the data dredging. Yeah? If you torture the data hard enough, they will tell you anything you want. And the bias comparison, for example, exclusion of the patient in this case, or exclusion of the area to be surveyed, right? Because you wanted to do the survey to estimate how many rich people in Jakarta. And then by the time you decide your sampling, you immediately remove, for example, Kampung Melayu because it's next to the PPS. That could happen like that next day, yeah. Then you know from the very beginning you will probably get the bias estimate in this case. Right? And this is some levels of evidence. Systematic review is the highest in the randomized trials. This is the review in which you have several studies, you putting them together, you do the systematical review, and then you do some kind of meta-analysis based on that. The level 2 evidence is the randomized trial or observational study with dramatic effect, right? Like most of the studies or most of the requirement to approve a new standard of treatment is this level, level 2 part. And level 3 is non-randomized controlled cohort study or follow-up study. This is when you talk about the level of evidence in your area, perhaps it's most likely level 3 evidence in here because you don't do any study which is wanted to randomized control studies in that sense. It's all observational studies. And then the level 4 in the medicine, case series, case control study, or historical control studies, and so on. Then the level 5 mechanism-based reasoning. So, for example, when you go to like some, I'm not going to say the name of the researcher, perhaps, like when you try that alat anti-cancer yang dari it's coming from with the battery, right? If there is no experiment or there is no clinical trials on that yet, you come to this level 5 mechanism-based reasoning. Why? Because I believe, for example, based on the theory of the weak electromagnetic field, that a weak electricity like this will be able to kill cancer tumor, for example. You said you can say things like that. However, if you don't do that test up to the level 2, you shouldn't be able to. You should not give that kind of things to the patient yet. So this is perhaps it will help you to do the compose a little bit article related to that the thing I just mentioned to you. I wanted to talk a little bit about randomized study, but I don't know, maybe because this is a little bit difficult, not difficult, a little bit boring, boring things perhaps for you. I don't know whether we should go to this direction or we could simply just open the discussion now and then, What do you think, Patio?
After this, we have other.
Well, this randomized studies are quite a lot in here because
this
is all medicine things.
Medicine things.
Maybe this is for UI nanti.
Okay. Because after this, we are going to better also have to present in FKUI. So
I think this is really for them. You will be very bored in here, but we can discuss general things.
Okay. Yes.
In here, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think thank you, Pak. Finish. Okay. Is there any question? Okay, Butio, silakan. I'm Patio. This is Butio. Yeah.
How could it possible? In the meantime, I would like to drink.
Please,
All
Pak.
agent.
Can you see the previous slide?
This one?
Yeah, in biostatistics, there is a level of evidence. But for basic, for example, like in market demography, I teach demography. Some of my students sometimes worry, or even not only worry, they feel like that when they find that some of the variables, according to the result of their research, is not significant. And they even crying in front of me because of their result. I think there is a similarity between biostatistics and demography. we follow like a literal review of theoretical, underlying theoretical, something like that. So for that case, I told my students that don't worry if you find that your result is not, I mean the variable is not significant. Uh, but find the justification for that reason, maybe the result or maybe the local something like that. But in your case, for the biostatistic, there is a level of the, sometimes maybe you said that the case that you mentioned at the level 5. But in our, there's no level of evidence like this.
Yeah, that in statistics that apply to biomedicine or to the health science, indeed it's very strict. Why? Because we are dealing with the human. We are dealing kalau if you make a wrong decision to give a drug, for example, to the people, you're playing with the nyawanya orang. So the ethics there is very, I mean, you really need to pay attention to the ethics. Because anything you made in here, a little mistake, you playing with somebody's life. So that's why they put this is the level of evidence that in order to be able to be approved, for example, to give the drug to the people, you have to have at least level 2 of evidence, which is being defined as an adequately power randomized trial or observational study with dramatic effect. So in this case, if you wanted to go with that special helmet, that or apa nama, jacket to treat breast cancer, for example, you should really at least to go to that level 2. From that point, I understand why there are a lot of medical people in here go against that thing. Not that they are against; they are probably happy to see the result, but it has to be tested to the level 2 in order to be approved. Now, go back to your original questions or statement about this in the field of demography, let's say. Indeed, what you said is true. Like what you say, what is suggested from statistic in this case, we as statisticians always talk about general population or the population on average, for example, right? But we do not talk about little things which is particular. For example, if your statistic talking about Indonesia in general, and you ask your student to do case studies in Jakarta only, it might be just the result that you have maybe different from the result of in the national. If national say for example, the sex between men and I mean the proportion of sex between men and women is significantly different. Maybe in Jakarta it's not, and it's not a surprise to me. It's not a surprise. In this case, like you said, probably just need to explain why our data in here inconsistent with the national data. Yeah, and I have no problem with that. Of course, that's going to be a good thing to do.
If you agree with my statement, like you said that, maybe this is a change for me and also maybe from Abu Dhabi to convince Pak Hadius as Wadir Satu to also socialize it to our lecturer here in SPIS because some of, some of our lecturers sometimes press the student. This is should be significant.
No need to test.
No need to test.
That's by itself already biased. Huh?
Yeah.
And that happens already also. There is a so-called publication bias. Because in medicine, people also tend to do the same thing. Only publish the thing which is significant. While they do not publish the thing which is negative study. Well, in fact, this is very important that you publish the negative
Significant
study.
results is the result.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will not ask my student to only publish the positive or significant. No, even if it is negative, that's a good thing
Yeah.
because they enrich.
As long as you follow scientific methods,
Voila.
scientific process, scientific research,
Very
that's
true.
the main thing. But what she said that some of our friends here, Everything should be significant.
Wakil Director is, he knows.
Everything should be significant. Everything should be significant. Well, slowly we may change.
Other comment or questions? Ayo. Bu Siti, oh, this one. Wait, Dewi. Aisyah have a lot of questions. Oh, Budi, yeah.
Yes, some student of us is think when we then research, they think the hypothesis is a conclusion.
Yes.
Student speaking.
The conclusion there is not significant.
Yes, and that's, I mean, I remember when I was at the university in Unhalu, yeah, some of our friends, they really love to see the controversy things, controversial things. So they like those people who really have some rebellion mind, if you wish to call it. I mean, this is maybe it's not really a proper term, but they love to see if this is against the theory. If you do the experiment in education, it goes against the theory. For example, they say, oh, yeah, this is good to report.
And one thing they have to differentiate between statistically significance and practically significant, clinically significant. Maybe the statistics significant, but it's not significant in terms of nutrition or in terms of health, in terms of agriculture. So significant in statistics and significance in practice, two different things. Substantive significance and statistically significant, they are two different things.
So, for example, Pak Batiar, so we last week I was becoming the jury of PhD in UI, Faculty of Medicines, and the project was, I think, 300 million rupiah for the project itself because it's using the genomics, and most of the genes they're not significant. So we have to because I'm working on that for research and a decision to say that okay, just report anything. The thing is that you just have to explain why it's not significant. At the time, maybe because the sample size is low. So why the sample size is small? Yeah, because it's so, it's so expensive. For one test, it could be like between 20 to 30 million rupiah. And then a statistician said, no, you have to add. You cannot do that but just to explain it, because this is significant because of that, and then because of the number of samples is small, we cannot just means that we cannot. There are some limitation on that study. You have to explain the limitation because the power itself. If you have the sample size small, there are several limitations. Explain that. As long as we can explain that clearly, and then the method we use is follow all the methods supposed to go. It's fine. And he graduated now.
Yeah. Well, maybe the difference is not statistically significant in terms of statistics, but in terms of health or in terms of nutrition, the difference is significant.
Yes.
Small difference can be significant in terms of other subjects, even though in statistics it's not significant. So it depends whether you see from statistical viewpoint or you see from other subjects, from education, from psychology, or from health, medicine. So such small difference may be significant from other viewpoints, even though in statistics it's not significant.
It's true. Yeah.
So it depends from which side you're looking at the significance.
And such thing you can only you'll be able to judge only by experience. That's why we're asking you to do more and more reading.
So for that project, because we have several genes that occurs to be more to significant, so we discussed with the experts on that field. So they said it's fine, it's okay, it's good because from thousands of genes you end up with this list of genes, and then this already something new, even though statistically significant, but for them it's something.
Maybe the reduction in blood temperature is significant from the medical viewpoint, even though from statistical viewpoint, it's not significant. From medical viewpoint, the drop of 1 or 2 is significant enough. But from statistical viewpoint, it's not significant. So two different things.
Yeah, that's why when designing the study, for example, in the clinical study, you really need a collaboration with the physician, with the doctor. Why? Because they know the field. They know to judge which one is medically significant, and statistician could not determine this medically significant. Something for us which is significant might not be significant, or and the other way around. So we need to ask them and then listen to them, and from that point we can design the study and empower the study properly.
Even the small difference can be very significant, statistical viewpoint. But for them, it's a very small difference. It's not significant.
Yes, yeah.
You are doing testing, statistics, with this large sample size, becomes significant.
That's why
Small, very small difference.
we have to realize that statistics is all driven by the sample size. I mean, when you talk about, I mean, if you do like a study in which you power the study to have very large number of patients, right? You will be able to detect even very small difference.
Yeah.
In this case, but whether that difference is actually significant or not, clinically, that's more important. That's why you should ask the clinical people first, even before try to power the study.
Yeah, it is still a difference or have influence, but it's not significant.
Statistically.
Yeah, because we in statistics we test a parameter from our sample. That's why it is still have a difference or influence, but not significant. And Prof. Agung said, Prof. Agung is a friend of Prof. Abu Zar.
Both of you from Ann Arbor.
I don't know where he
graduated.
Maybe from other university in US. California.
Yeah.
UCLA.
He said you have still right that your tests have difference. It still have difference, but not significant. And but it is a problem in statistics when you test assumption in regression, like let's say normal test. It's a problem when this is not normal. Is it we have to improve model, or it's okay, it's not significant, no problem. It
could be both. It could be both. From the experimental point of view, yeah, as a trialist, we call ourselves trialists. What we need to do is actually to plan the study carefully and properly. And one way to plan the study carefully and properly, first of all, we have to have, at the very least, some data already available. That's data not necessarily coming from randomized study, but you have something to be based on. And secondly, you have to go to the people in the medical field who really understand what is the not scientifically significant, but what medically might be significant. Okay? Let's say, for example, when you have a certain drug in non-small cell lung cancer, in which the patient is can only go for 12 months. The overall survival, median overall survival around 12 months. In such case, if you are able to add another 3 months, is already very significant from there. Yeah. However, if you go for malaria, for example, in such case, it will not be. Why? Because malaria, people can have a very long life. If they, let's say, the median is 5 years, let's say, if you're not treated, and then you wanted to add what, 3 months on that,
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
maybe you need to add another 2 years or so to be able to. So it's really relative things, and then that judgment should come from the medical people. I'm talking about medical, of course. In the your field, it's probably something else. Huh? In your field, it's probably something else.
Ada lagi? Pak Anang? Any question, Pak Anang?
Panang dunianya berbeda.
Tadi juga pakai.
It's coming from different world.
Nanya pakai Nihongo.
Pak Takdir?
I have an exercise from them if they don't have any. They can do that because this is a hot topic with things.
Ada question? Any questions? Any other questions related to different things? Yeah. Any statistical or other
Yeah,
method?
just for discussion. You know.
Yeah, Pak Takdir.
I want to ask something from you as well. Have you about the phenomenon of the quality of the bachelor thesis or the bachelor final project? Sometimes it happens in nowadays, but because students want to study or high level of high level of thinking or high level of research topic, which is advanced in advanced level. But as you say before, that for bachelor level, we only just replicate another resource or literature, and but it happens nowadays. So have you experienced that in another country?
Like what you mean is like the students really do copycat, essentially copying things from the previous thesis,
Yes,
let's
yeah,
say.
because they have a lot of information today about the Armstrong, for example, and they want to try to study about that. Even they don't enough experience.
They expect too much.
And the phenomenon cause the I said that low level or easy level research will become the student will become not as self-confidence about the research.
Yeah, it could.
And this is a phenomenon nowadays.
It could probably happen, yeah. It could probably, but me, because I'm my focus is more like a research on a daily basis. I only teach like once a year, maybe. I'm not really teaching like you guys in here. You're teaching the student classes classical ways. You know much better than I do what the students think. But generally, it could happen things like that. But the one which is more responsible in this case is the pembimbingnya.
And maybe
Supervisor.
some students are very ambitious.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll use something very advanced techniques, but actually they are not being taught their level. They use something above their level, beyond their level.
If they really understand.
Well, there's a problem. Sometimes
problem.
actually they don't have the basic because it's not being taught here, and they use something advanced above their level.
Should we limit that ambitious like that?
Yeah, that's the part of the, for instance, you are the supervisor, you say, no, this is not for you. This is for doctoral degree, something like that. You just go something you can understand, you can capture, because this is a basic level training in terms of research. So instead of doing something really advanced above their level, and they don't understand actually.
Yeah. That's true.
The problem is that sometimes I told the students that, but sir, the jury, they said, oh, it's only that. So they're afraid that is that only that you do, gitu. But for me, it's beyond their.
Yeah.
But
they
reach. Yeah. But for some of the jury, for some of the
they want something
else.
They don't understand it.
Yeah.
and normally such juries or such teachers are new teachers. Because the difference between the new teachers, the experienced teacher, and a very well experienced depends on the questions. Like those people, the new teachers, normally they try to prove or to give the student the things that they only learned last night. They themselves only learned last night, yeah, because but the experienced teacher only give the things which is needed and they know it really well. But the very well experienced teacher only give the things which is the students need.
There's a problem. When some people came back from overseas, from studies, they study at doctoral level. They come home here, and they come to teach. They when they learn at doctoral level, they give it to the as a student.
And it's a good thing, perhaps, but it's too difficult.
But I just came back from ITB
Uh-huh.
in Bandung. He learned something new over there for his level,
Yeah.
and then he came here and teach the students.
But you know what? When I was a young docent, it was like that because that's the way I learned as well. Yeah. That's why it's important to have this colloquium. I think if you can start these kind of things, because with that, even once a week or even once every 2 weeks, that's going to be really helpful for students. They will gather all the information, and without you realizing, actually, they already can walk along with this part of research. Yeah, it's an important thing to do. You can make like in here stats club, let's say, yeah, statistics club. If you wish to, for example, you have a new methodology, even among the docents in here, among the researchers in here. If you have new methodology, for example, you read from the paper and then you are aware these things are really new and then not everybody understand, for example, and then you think it's going to be important to be able to be adapted by the BPS, you can do such thing. Ask one of the teachers in here, or one of the docents, or one of the professors to do like a 15 or half an hour presentation, and then you do the discussion about these things, and then these kind of things will share. You will share a lot of things, and it could probably from that sharing, it could probably trigger new research. It could probably trigger new research, and this is the way you keep in pace with the current situation and with the research in the field. So you can do it two levels: the levels of the teachers itself or the level of the students. So that's probably good thing.
Okay, good. Panah.
Eventually.
I would like to ask you one question. There is a fact that this institution is a diploma. So the subject of this study in this institution is to become practitioners, not academics. So is it fair or is it necessary to give or to ask the student to have the ability to have analytical thinking? Is it important to ask them to have that kind of ability and include to the decision of their final project?
So very good questions, and really depends on the purpose. What I understand though, even though this is intended to be a practitioner, but the level itself is the levels of undergraduate, right? And the levels of undergraduate, it should have some flavor already of the critical thinking. In high school, for example, if you go to STM, right, and then you are able to do like to build a building, you don't need critical thinking on that. But if you go to already to the Teknik Sipil D3, even for D3, for example, you are expected to do some critical things. So, for example, if you build your house with the loose ground, let's say, or in the rawa-rawa, let's say, right? You with the level of the D3 in your diploma 3 or diploma 4, you should be able to know already that in such case you have to provide a very good foundation of the house, and you have to do the tiang panjang or whatever first, right? And in such case, I think even though we don't expect them to reach the level of researcher, we should really not closing the door that they should be able to think critically. So it's a fine line. I understand it's a fine line. Try to balance between the practical things and also between the academic, more to academic way. But I'm sure if you can you could do that in a parallel and then create like to balance those things, you will be able to have or to produce graduates that are coming from the school with very helpful for the government itself, because a lot of things that happen, in the era, for example, probably not in the theory that you teach in here. Like you teach the things in here that might not be applicable directly when you come to the to area to Sulawesi Tenggara, for example, in which the distribution of the population, for example, is only in the very remote village and so on and so forth. And in such situation, they need critical thinking. They need critical thinking in able to make an unbiased estimate, let's say, of the things that you're doing for survey. This is just one thing that might probably silly in the example, but it might give you some, some kind of.
I think this is tertiary level education. Critical thinking is a must. If it is a secondary level of education, SMR, STM, SMPs, maybe you don't need critical thinking, but it is a tertiary level of education.
Because if I compare the academic system in Indonesia, at least in this institution, with the institution in Japan, the expectation from the lecturer, from the student is very different. I think the expectation from the lecturers here is very high from the student. Very high.
Pak Wakil Direktur.
Yeah, maybe that's and the second one is that in Japan, the graduates from the undergraduates, no industry have any expectation that the fresh graduate is have an ability to work. No one, no company has that kind of expectation. So it's very different from here, especially from BPS, because every people in BPS is very high expectation that the graduates from this institution is ready to work. But yeah, I think that's kind of different perception. I think.
Do you have magang program in here before graduation?
No. There is no any orientation program, especially to prepare the fresh graduates to ready to work.
It could probably reach Pak Wakil Direktur. Yes. I mean, that could probably reach.
No, by name, there always magang.
Okay.
By name, there is magang. Of course, there is magang program in BPS.
There is no program to prepare them to ready.
Because they expect that once you graduate from here, ready to work.
You can do anything.
But actually, the graduate from our institutes, they work 2, 3 months, 4 months, they can adjust. Basically, they can adjust 3, 4 months and they can work. So maybe that 3 months, magang program, whatever you call it, you want to formalize, it's up to us whether you want to formalize.
So you have some kind of things, but not really formal.
Yeah. But sometimes they ask them to move from one department, one division to another division. But sometimes they're just stuck in one division.